What's up, everybody? This is Parker Hurley from BearGogglesOn.com. Check me out on Twitter at Parker Hurley, at BearGogglesOn.com. This is another episode of the Bears Pod with Parker Hurley. This is our 10th episode. We're still talking NFL draft. We're still talking Chicago Bears every Tuesday, every Thursday, 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central. Tune in, check it out. Leave some comments, guys. Like I always say, you guys dictate the chat with your comments. If you're listening to this after the live show, even leave some comments for future episodes, any questions you want me to discuss, anything like that, or any critiques or anything you want to see the show go direction wise. So leave some comments, hit me up on Twitter at Parker Hurley, and we're gonna get into some Chicago Bears news. First and foremost, gonna do a little humble brag here and say, if you've been listening to the podcast and if you listened about a week or so ago, I highlighted a couple free agents. I said the Chicago Bears probably aren't done in free agency. They're probably going to look to edge rusher. And one of the guys I mentioned was Rasheem Green. So this is one of the benefits of name me another Chicago Bears podcaster, another Chicago Bears person out there that was talking about a week or two ago saying Rasheem Green should be a free agent that the Chicago Bears sign. I had it on this podcast. You can go listen to the receipts about a week or two ago. I talked about why it was such a great fit. Today, the Chicago Bears make that signing. Honestly, when you look at it, I mean, it's obviously not a game-changing fit, but when you really do look at it, Rasheem Green is one of the best players on the Chicago Bears, defensive line, his edge rusher group. So as much as people want to say, oh, just a depth move, not this big free agent signing, okay, look at who you have on your defensive line right now. And the reality with Rasheem Green is he's 26 years old and he's entering his sixth NFL season. So it's really, that's pretty impressive when you look at it. He entered the NFL at age 20. Most people, their prime ages are age 25 through 30. So when you actually look at it, these next couple of years, these are going to be the best years of Rasheem Green's career. So that was one of the main reasons I highlighted him and said Rasheem Green is somebody that, not that I always look at it from, I don't care who I want. And, everybody says, oh, we want Ngakoue. And I say, well, if you look at the Chicago Bears, they probably don't want Yannick Ngakoue, and they probably want someone like Rasheem Green. Like I said, you can listen to that from a week or so ago when I said that, and it all came to fruition exactly like I said, because Rasheem Green is so much better in run defense. And Rasheem Green plays, the hustle game. Rasheem Green's 2 years younger. He's going to come on a cheaper deal. All those things add up to where he's an Eberflus fit. He's a 4-3 style fit. And Ngakoue necessarily isn't. And like I said, you could say that, he's signing like 3 weeks before the NFL draft. He's signing for not a lot of serious money. Okay, he's not this big name signing. He's not this game-changing signing. But I keep saying, look at when Travis Gibson and Dominique Robinson were the starters last season, and then Al-Qadim Muhammad is gone. You take out Al-Qadim Muhammad and you bring in DeMarcus Walker. And now you bring in Rasheem Green. Of those four, how do you rank those four? Probably put DeMarcus Walker one, but the reality is that Rasheem Green is easily the number 2 guy on this list. Maybe not easily, but he certainly is the number 2 guy on this edge rushers list. I have an article right now. It just came out on BearGogglesOn.com. Check it out, where I talk about the 3 reasons that Rasheem Green is a good signing, and I talk about the 3 stats that you really need to know about him. And the first one is he had a 6.6% run stop rate last season, and he had 19 run stops last season. You look at the Chicago Bears, who was the team leader? Travis Gibson with 11, and who was the team leader in run stop rate was Al-Qadim Muhammad at 3.6. So Green is stopping the run at a 3% higher clip, and almost double what the best Chicago Bears edge rusher was last season. You look at Travis Gibson, he's over 3.2% higher. Rasheem Green stops the run at about 3.2% higher than Travis Gibson did last season, and he had 19 run stops last season. Rasheem Green on fewer snaps, mind you, than Travis Gibson, who had 11 run stops. So you compare and you say, well, between Travis Gibson and Dominique Robinson, a lot of people would say, oh, Travis Gibson's the better one. Well, they signed Rasheem Green a week before free agent, or before the NFL draft, and he's better than Travis Gibson against the run, pretty much hands down. And you look throughout his career, he's better than Travis Gibson. One of the things I wrote about is why didn't they sign Yannick Ngakoue? Why did they sign Rasheem Green? Rasheem Green has that 6.6% run stop rate. Yannick Ngakoue is down at 3.5%. Rasheem Green has a 12% missed tackle rate. Yannick Ngakoue at 21%. Rasheem Green at 63 run grade per PFF. Ngakoue at 44 run grade per PFF. So you look at it and you say, okay, Rasheem Green isn't the flashier player, isn't the bigger name. Yannick Ngakoue only gets sacks because he sells out for sacks. He only gets them, on specific situations. He's not a down in and down out player. Rasheem Green doesn't win as often as Ngakoue, but down in and down out, he competes more, and that's why he's obviously much better in the run game. Now you look to the passing game. Um, Rasheem Green had 26 pressures last season. Travis Gibson did have more with 30, but when you look at, like I said, Rasheem Green had fewer snaps. When you look at it on a per snap basis, pass rush productivity per Pro Football Focus, Rasheem Green's at 6, and Travis Gibson is a little bit lower at 5.3. Rasheem Green has an 11.6% win rate. Travis Gibson was 10.6. Rasheem Green is better than Travis Gibson, and Rasheem Green, as if we stand right now, the Chicago Bears 2 starters at edge rushers. The Chicago Bears 4 defensive linemen, as we stand right now, is Rasheem Green as a starter, DeMarcus Walker is a starter on the 2 edges, Justin Jones in the interior, and Andrew Billings in the interior. Those are your 4 starters. Obviously, the draft can change that, and we're about 3 weeks away, 5 pods after this. So one thing we're going to do as we kind of wrap up some of the Rasheem Green talk, I just want to talk about, people are saying it's some depth signing. And while the draft will probably dictate that and push him to depth, right now they signed Rasheem Green and he's probably going to start. Ryan Poles didn't draft Travis Gibson. So, I mean, Travis Gibson standing there as, the quote unquote starter. He just lost his job to Rasheem Green. And that speaks probably more to Travis Gibson than Rasheem Green. But still, it tells you that, like, this isn't just some depth signing, whatever. This is a guy who's probably going to play. So we are going to shift it into draft talk. Like I said, leave some comments. We got the man I am Skokes here with some comments. Leave some comments if you want to talk about who we should talk about draft wise. If you want to talk about the free agency and things like that. We are going to shift into mainly the skill players. We're going to try and talk about, like I said, we have about 3 weeks. So we're going to do this week some skill players, next week some offensive line, and then the following week some defensive line. Kind of go, who are some guys the Chicago Bears, we talked pick 9 to death for the most part. We'll talk about pick 9 a little bit, but we talked about that to death. We're going to talk about those 3 picks from 53 to 64, some fits there, some day 3 guys, some round 4, some round 7, some later round guys. So starting with quarterback, obviously they traded out of 9, or they traded out of 1 to 9, so they're not going to go for any of the top 4. You even look at Hendon Hooker. One interesting thing is that they brought Aiden O'Connell in. And yeah, that's another a good comment, is the closer we get, the more unpredictable Poles becomes. And that's one of the things that I will touch on real quick, is that I think while that is true, and I do agree with that, and we really don't know, he could go in plenty of directions. And I think I've opened my mind to the thought of, I'm still pretty committed to that they're going to go left tackle at 9, but I've at least opened my mind to the idea of, okay, what if they don't? How did the board fit together? But one thing I will say is, everybody was saying, oh, we thought they were going to take, a receiver at, it was like 43 or 45 last season, and they took Kyler Gordon. We didn't think they were going to take a cornerback, and then they took a safety. We didn't think they were going to take that. I think when you talk about, pick 43 and 48, you're talking about, that's so much further down the board, to where, the Chicago Bears could have had Kyler Gordon at like 27. And so when he's sitting there at 45 and they're debating, 27, or, they have George Pickens or whatever at like 50, it's so much easier to take the guy at 27 versus the guy at 50, who's the next best player available. When you're there at 9, it's kind of, like 3 versus 6. You could say, well, 3 versus 6, but we have the serious need is more with the 6th best player, and he's still the 6th best player on our board. So I still think in the top 10, and I still think in the top 10, it's much more, I wouldn't necessarily say consensus, but like, who the elite guys are, who the studs are. At pick 45, where the Chicago Bears were picking last season, and where people are saying, last season we all thought they were going to go one way and Ryan Poles went the other way. At that spot, it's so much easier because the draft already went out of control by 40 something picks. Whereas in that top 10, there's still, and it is, as unpredictable as that pick, and trading down is obviously a scenario, but if they sit there at 9, what are the realistic options? You know, the three tackles: Broderick, Paris, Peter Skoronsky, Jackson Smith and Jigba. You know, Lucas Vaness. If Tyree Wilson's there, you know, like other than that, yeah, I mean, I guess the two cornerbacks would be a little bit surprising, but I mean, even if Gonzalez is there, I think it would just be surprising that he was there. And that may be another situation where, yeah, he was the third guy on their board and he happened to be there at number 9. But that's where I don't know. You know, I think we're going to see how unpredictable he is, and we're going to see how different from consensus, because I think it's a lot easier when the board breaks one way. And like I said, you know, Kyler Gordon just stands out far and away. He's tiers and tiers above the next best guy. When at number 9, you're probably not going to have a guy tiers and tiers above the next best guy, and you're probably going to have a lump of guys, and it's probably going to be similar to consensus, because everyone kind of says, you know, after like 20, the draft sort of falls off, and you know, somebody who you rank 20 could be ranked 50 on somebody's board, but it's very rare. You know, what's the lowest that Paris Johnson is on anybody's board? You know, like 18 maybe is as low as he can get, you know, versus, like I said, maybe someone is 20 on someone's board and someone's 50 on someone else's board. So I do think that, you know, but I do think the one thing where polls could get very unpredictable is like that 53, 61, and 64 range. Very interesting. Like I said, they brought in Aiden O'Connell from Purdue. I think he's a day 3 guy. I think for the most part, if the Chicago Bears took him, it would be there. I think that one's interesting because, you know, when they signed PJ Walker, when they shift this offense to Justin Fields, you think that they're probably going to go in a different direction. And Aiden O'Connell is like the opposite of mobile. And he's more of, you know, if they had stuck with, you know, Trevor Siemian, you know, and they played like a Trevor Siemian style of offense, that's kind of more of what Aiden O'Connell. So are they just, you know, gathering information on Aiden O'Connell? Do they say, if O'Connell falls to that 7th round, let's take him, let's stash him on the bench, and just in case, you know, he's just there. If we want to pull the lever and we want to switch gears and we want to change the offense back to what it was this first 7 weeks, I think if anybody, just because the Bears showed some interest, Aiden O'Connell, but some guys that I think, Stetson Bennett's kind of interesting because he's a lot more mobile than people think. And I could see him being, you know, a good person in the room. I know a lot of people wonder about, you know, his maturity and things like that, but he won a starting job at Georgia. He obviously showed it in the meeting rooms. And like I said, he's a little more mobile than people think. Stetson Bennett's an interesting one. Dorian Thompson Robinson is my pick. Like, if the Chicago Bears want to go with a perfect guy who could take one season as the 3rd stringer, and then by next season they could let go of PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson Robinson could be the backup for Justin Fields, I think that would be the best scenario for the Chicago Bears. And it may warrant, I don't think the Chicago Bears are going to draft a quarterback, but if they took one, I really think it could be Dorian Thompson Robinson. Another guy is Jaron Hall. I don't see the upside. At least I see more because of the mobility, because he's more of a playmaker. Jaron Hall tries to be a playmaker at times, but he's an older prospect already. I thought he was limited physically, and I just didn't see it with Jaron Hall. And same thing with Malik Cunningham. You know, a lot of people say, you know, oh, you know, Lamar Jackson should have played wide receiver. He's like the Louisville quarterback who I don't know if he would make it there. So of them all, I think I would say Dorian Thompson Robinson's my top guy, then Stetson Bennett, then Aiden O'Connell, just because they've shown that interest, then Jaron Hall, then Malik Cunningham. It's hard to see anyone else be a fit for the Chicago Bears. So let's get into some running backs. And it's still, everyone's going to say, oh, well, what about Bijan Robinson for number 9? Let's talk about Bijan Robinson. The comments that Ryan Poles made at the owners' meetings tell me that he likes much more of a running back by committee. He likes the fact that he doesn't commit a lot to it. He said with the Chiefs, you know, guys like Damian Williams, you know, we won a Super Bowl in a committee of that sort. So I just don't see them drafting one high, so it takes them off the board. I think first off for Bijan Robinson, I don't think you need to tune into this podcast for me to tell you that Bijan, I think, is the number 1 guy. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, it's tough to see them taking him, although the fact is that Khalil Herbert and Dante Foreman, if they had a weakness, it would be pass catching. If you could instill Jahmyr Gibbs in there, and he would obviously be the pass catching back. I think it's too rich in terms of their other needs in the draft, and so I think they're looking a little later. The Chicago Bears brought in Zach Charbonnet, who, in my opinion, I think he's like he's right in that, he's not in the Bijan tier, but maybe right in that with Gibbs and like right below them for that 2-3 slot is Zach Charbonnet. I think he's more of the do everything type of guy. I think I wouldn't say a rich man's David Montgomery, but I think he has a lot of the similar traits to David Montgomery with maybe a little more juice and a little more finish and a little more of that ability to kind of, when he cuts laterally, I think he keeps moving forward. Whereas Montgomery was kind of much more of a left to right guy than a north south guy a little too often. I think Charbonnet can go left to right, but I think he can get north south when needed, and the Chicago Bears showed some interest in him. I think one of the reasons they showed interest is because between Gibbs and Charbonnet, Charbonnet is going to be the one who goes lower in the draft. And like I said, Charbonnet has the 3 down skill set. I still think Charbonnet is going to go a little too high for the Chicago Bears. It brings them there's kind of like a huge glut of, who's the next guy on some people's list. Kendre Miller's a really interesting one. Obviously took TCU to the national championship. He's another one that, I think he's a little more left right, but he can get more north south than some of these other running backs. But he's got that wiggle, he's got that ability to press and cut and things like that. A little more limited in the passing game. Abandakanda, another one I really like from Pittsburgh. But to me, Abandakanda is just like he's far too similar to Khalil Herbert, and it would be hard to see him taking Khalil Herbert's job. And the same can be said with Zach Evans, Tajay Spears, Sean, and the same can be said with Devin Achane. I just can't see the Chicago Bears drafting Devin Achane because he's like a smaller version of Khalil Herbert, and I just can't see that being a fit for them. Some guys that I can really see being fits: Tajay Spears from Tulane, Sean Tucker. The thing with Tajay Spears is, if you're the Chicago Bears and you already have Foreman and Khalil Herbert, you could add a passing down back for sure. And like I said, maybe if Charbonnet slips to the 4th round and you're saying this is an upgrade over both of them, we could take that. But I wonder if Tajay Spears is going to go too high. Whereas if the Chicago Bears drafted Tajay Spears, he would be in a 3-man committee. So it just doesn't seem like. And yeah, I am Skoke says Treston Ebner has a chance to develop also. And that's where it's so hard to, even until like the 7th round almost, to see them taking a running back in this draft. And that's where, you can go over some of these guys and say you like them and things like that. But Tajay Spears, I think he's getting a lot of hype too. So, and while I do think Spears is better than Ebner, I think the draft cost that you have to put into Spears versus, what if Ebner turns into a better back and Travis Homer is still there. Sean Tucker is a really interesting one because he's falling under the radar because he's had a hamstring injury and he hasn't been able to play. He hasn't been able to prove himself at the pro days and everything. He posted like a home workout. We'll see, how that affects him and things like that. But I think, if he goes in like the 5th round, he's a good enough pass protector and he can catch the ball and he's explosive enough out of the backfield that I think the first person on this list of my rankings that I think the Chicago Bears is a fit for would be Sean Tucker. And I think he would be a great one. Another one is Roshan Johnson. I think he would be a really good fit. I know he's starting to trend up mock drafts and things like that too. And all of a sudden, if he goes on day 2 and not day 3, I wouldn't like it as much. And, when I first wrote about Roshan Johnson, at Bear Goggles On, check that out. He was like a round 7 guy. And, I was saying in round 7, you just can't get better than Roshan. And now he's going like like I said, maybe the 3rd round. But if he goes in the 4th round, the thing with Roshan is that he brings a lot of the traits that Dante Foreman brings in terms of he's got good inside between the tackles vision. He can grind out those 4th and 1s, but also those, I always say, on 2nd and 10, sometimes you want to get to 3rd and 6, and Khalil Herbert sometimes gets you into 3rd and 12 because he's shooting for the big one. So when that happens, I think that a guy like Roshan is a good power back. But the difference between Roshan and Dante Foreman is he can catch the ball a lot more smoothly, and he's a much better pass protector than Dante Foreman. The good thing with Roshan Johnson, too, is that he's a special teams guy. So like Skoke said in the comment, okay, Treston Ebner could make the roster, but if Roshan Johnson beats out Treston Ebner due to special teams, then he's getting the 4th job no matter what. And if he beats out Homer due to pass protection, now he's getting the 3rd job. And, all of a sudden he could beat out Dante Foreman as the power back and get that 2nd job. And it almost turns into Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson, and they kind of phase out the 2 free agent guys. And if you can get that in the 4th round, I'm more interested in that. If you can get that, or in the seventh round, fifth, I'm more interested in that third round. It starts to get iffy with Roshan. So I'm gonna take a drink here. Before I think these are more of the fits here. Um, Evan Hall. The big thing I have against Evan Hall, and everyone's gonna be from Chicago. Everyone's gonna be interested in Evan Hall because he's from Northwestern and he's a pass catching back, so he fits easily with Foreman and Herbert because their weaknesses are the pass catching. I think he's just a better overall pass catcher than Treston Ebner. He's one of the big plays that happened last season for Ebner was he tried to set up a screen and the timing was just so poor on it that he ended up getting Justin Fields sacked because Fields was waiting for Ebner to get out there and get out there, and he just wouldn't. Like, he was so slow to set it up. And after that, they benched him and put Darrington Evans in. So that showed you how, mad they were at Treston Ebner. And it makes you think that if somebody like Evan Hall could step in and catch the ball a little better. The real issue I have with Evan Hall is that he's awful in pass protection. I mean, he's terrible, and I just don't think. I think he would show up to training camp, he would lose to Travis Homer, and he would, ride on the bench for most of the season. And that's where Roshan Johnson I would rank ahead of Evan Hall because if the Bears are going to pick up a pass catcher, he better know how to pass protect. Chase Brown from Illinois is an interesting one because he does know how to pass protect. My issue with him is that Evan Hall is much better between the tackles, in my opinion, than Chase Brown. Chase Brown just runs, I say like too sporadically, too like loosely. He's not as tight between the tackles. He kind of is. He's everywhere with his movements. He's jittery. Whereas Evan Hall, it looks like he knows what he's doing a little bit more. Yeah, Skokes agreeing completely with the blocking and Chase Brown, or yeah, Evan Hall and Chase Brown, yeah, those are two guys that obviously are going to be fan favorites because the Northwestern kid, the Illinois kid, and they both can catch passes, so it gets fans excited. But I still, because of the pass protection, especially from Hall, I can't see him getting on the field next season. And yeah, Chase Brown either. Travis Dye is a guy who could get on the field because of the pass protection, but you just wonder, he's almost like a poor man's Homer in terms of, athleticism, in terms of burst, things of that nature. So I think that's for the most part, most of the running backs that I wanted to get to, because we only have 8 minutes here, and I did definitely wanted to get to receivers. We've talked Jackson Smith and Jigba to death, and we've talked about him at number 9, and we're going to talk about him a lot more going forward. So if they pass on him, guys they're going to miss out on Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnston. I don't think anyone is going to, disagree with me here. My favorite sleeper for the Chicago Bears, he was at the Senior Bowl. Some people are saying day 3. I think he's starting to rise a little bit. Jaden Reed from Michigan State had a really good junior season. Fell off senior season. I think the Michigan State offense had a lot to do with that in some ways. He went to the Senior Bowl, was one of the most dynamic players there. He can play. What I really like about Jaden Reed is he can play all 3 spots. He can be the X, he can be the Y, he can be the Z. And for the Chicago Bears, you gotta like that because they have their 3 guys. It's not like they're gonna who's gonna push somebody necessarily out. If they draft Smith and Jigba, sure, somebody's pushed out of the slot. Chase Claypool probably, but if if they draft Jaden Reed, he's kind of that 4th guy who could sub in for everybody. And what I really like about Jaden Reed, one, he can do things with the ball in his hands. You can hand the football off to him, which we know the Chicago Bears have been trying to do that. And 2, he's a punt returner. And we know the Chicago Bears, I mean, they had Dante Pettis returning punts. Pettis is not on any roster right now. So, I mean, what an upgrade that would be to draft Jaden Reed in day 3. Man, I would be all about that for the Chicago Bears in the 4th round as your number 4 receiver. Yeah, man, Skokes loves Jaden Reed too. He's my sleeper of the draft, and it seems like he's starting to move upboards now. But man, if like I said, if he could fall in that 4th round, because he was somebody who maybe if he comes out in 2021, he's a 2nd round pick, and because Michigan State's offense is so bad, he falls off a little bit. And kind of we've seen it from him. We've seen it from him. Now he's like a 4th, 5th later round pick. Would really like him. And like I said, for the Chicago Bears, oh, you have 3 receivers. How does he fit in? No, he can punt return immediately, and then he can also sub in for all 3 spots. The versatility is huge. Trey Palmer, another one really interesting. A guy that, did was at LSU, did basically nothing for 3 seasons. You can forgive him for that, when his first season at LSU is, with guys like Marshall and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and things like that. And obviously, it started to get a little worse, but and that is one of the things that I think is interesting with Palmer is, okay, you couldn't do the SEC, but then you go straight to Nebraska and you kill it. But I mean, the thing is, that's obviously a question, but the thing is, he was electric with the ball in his hands, and he's another one that is he can play in the return game, kick returns, punt returns. Velus Jones, I wouldn't say bust yet, but I mean, you could at least if Trey Palmer gets in there, one, he's Velus Jones has never been a good punt returner, and that's why Dante Pettis was better from the start. So Trey Palmer could step in right there, and then two, the kick returns, Velus Jones, won that back over, but still, you could see Trey Palmer has honestly more speed than Velus Jones, and kind of hit those creases. So he's definitely another interesting one. Another interesting one is Marvin Mims, who really, I mean, he just reminds me of Darnell Mooney, which is why it's hard to see the Chicago Bears drafting him. Um, I also don't know if where he's going to go. If he's like a fourth round pick, I could see Marvin Mims. You take him, and like I said, maybe he's that fourth receiver. He's also another return game guy. And then Darnell Mooney is a free agent after this season. Maybe he walks, and you take him. But I think Marvin Mims is starting to shoot up draft boards a little bit. Another interesting one because it's almost like the poor man's Jackson Smith and Jigba to me is Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. Definitely doesn't have that burner speed. I think he didn't play in the slot mostly, but I compared him favorably to Tyler Boyd. He's really similar, like all around profile wise, size, speed, weight, all that stuff. Really similar to Tyler Boyd. I think you stick him in the slot because he's not a burner. And really, when you look at his stats per PFF, it's like 80% of his yards came against zone, and he was getting pushed around in man coverage and things like that. But when you stick him in the slot, and he has that wiggle and he has that ability to get off of the football. In space, and he's a little bit better with the football in his hands than he is, like I said, kind of creating against man on man and winning those contested catch situations. But he's a safe, secure wide receiver. Like I said, if you just imagine Tyler Boyd, I think it's really easy to imagine Xavier Hutchinson. And so he's another one because he played outside, and then I think you move him into the slot. I think he's another one who could play both. And then you could move him. Chase Claypool goes, and then you could move him in. Yeah, I am Skokes brings up Yesovas, I think is his name, the Princeton guy. A lot of people compare him to Christian Watson. I was at the Senior Bowl, and obviously, it's so tough because North Dakota State produces NFL players and Princeton does not necessarily produce NFL players. And you saw that at the Senior Bowl. And somebody whose stock went up super high was Darius Rush, because Darius Rush was shutting down Iosovas from Princeton constantly at the Senior Bowl. And you saw him, he was running the routes for him basically. And Iosovas was, kind of giving the routes away to an SEC cornerback. And when you see Princeton versus SEC at the cornerback, or at the Senior Bowl, you understand, the SEC cornerback should win, but the SEC, and especially in Darius Rush's case, was just, in the pocket of Iosovas, was really, doing all the moves for him. But like you said, I mean, if that does fall from, Christian Watson went before the Bears even picked, their second round pick, he's not going to go that high. Iosovas isn't going that high. He's going day 3 because he's from Princeton and not North Dakota State. And because, like you said, he's developmental, and because, Watson was blowing up at the Senior Bowl, this Iosovas guy wasn't blowing up at the Senior Bowl. So maybe he is a guy that on day 3, and like I said, that's where it's tough for me to draft Jackson Smith, because, okay, yeah, they don't have a future. Chase Claypool's unsigned. Darnell Mooney's unsigned. They may need to look future drafting receiver, but Jackson Smith, I mean, he's, put him in right now, that sort of thing. If you draft one of those guys like Iosovas, like I said, Jaden Reed could back up every position for a season. Trey Palmer, you could get him involved because of the speed game, because of the end arounds and things of that nature. So, those guys you could at least use versus Jackson Smith. Like I said, now you're pushing Chase Claypool to that fourth guy. But yeah, Iosovas is another guy that, you draft him, you stash him for a season, and then maybe you move on from a guy like Mooney. I think he would no, he's really the Claypool, And he's like a poor man's Chase Claypool at this point, is essentially how you would look at it. Developmental, but has the size, has the speed. Maybe you stick him in the slot a little bit. As we wrap it up, some of my quick sleeper guys. Michael Wilson didn't have production at Stanford, a lot of injuries, was dominant at the Senior Bowl, dominant, really awesome, stood out to me multiple times. And that's what really woke me up and said, okay, maybe you could misguide the injuries. And Grant Dubose from Charlotte, I think quarterback play is killing Grant Dubose. I thought he was a solid route runner. I thought he had fluidity in his hips. Thought he cut the ball away from his body. Nakua from BYU, really liked him. Parker Washington, a good slot player. Hasn't done some testing, but I don't think speed is his game. I think he's a tough receiver. And yeah, we may touch on, we're going to touch on some tight ends. We're going to touch on some other guys. But that was really, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, my thoughts on the Rasheem Green signing. We'll be back on Thursday, 6:00. We may do some tight ends, probably some offensive line. I'm probably going to have another mock draft out, so we may even touch on that as the first or second topic there. So tune in Thursday at 6:00. We'll be in for 30 more minutes till 6:30. Right here, follow me at beargoggleson.com. Like I said, if you're listening after this live recording, go ahead and leave a comment for next episode, and I'll definitely react to it next episode. So we'll talk to you guys on Thursday, 6:00 Eastern, 5:00 Central, right here. We'll see you guys then.